I never imagined that the person I loved most could hurt me in the way that Mark did. It wasn't just the way he left me. It was that he left me for my own sister, Emily. Those words still feel like a brutal echo in my mind. A betrayal so deep, it shattered the foundation of everything I believed about family and love. My name is Mia Thompson, and I'm a 29-year-old marketing executive in Chicago. I'm here to share my story, not to seek sympathy, but to show how even the most painful betrayals can be a catalyst for growth and strength. Mark and I met at a summer music festival 5 years ago, when the city was alive with energy and everyone seemed to be chasing something bigger than themselves. He was charming, with a laugh that could light up a room and eyes that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. I was drawn to him instantly, and our whirlwind romance felt like a dream I never wanted to wake from. We shared countless moments, late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, and quiet Sunday mornings curled up on the couch. It felt like we were building something real, something lasting. But just beneath the surface, there were cracks I didn't want to see. Emily and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, we were close, best friends in many ways. But as we got older, our differences grew. She was the rebellious one, the risk-taker, always pushing boundaries, while I was more focused, driven to excel in my career. Despite that, I trusted her implicitly. She was family, after all, and I believed that bond was unbreakable. When Mark and I started dating, Emily was supportive, at least on the surface. She'd even joke about how lucky I was to have snagged such a great guy. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. I noticed Emily becoming more distant, less herself. I chalked it up to work stress or her own personal struggles, but looking back, the signs were there. The cold glances, the secretive phone calls, the sudden plans that didn't include me. Yet, I told myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe in the people I loved. The betrayal hit me like a freight train one unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Mark with dinner. Instead, I found my worst nightmare playing out before my eyes. Mark and Emily, sitting too close on the couch, laughing in a way that was meant to be shared only between lovers. The shock knocked the air out of me. For a moment, I was certain I was dreaming, or that this was some cruel trick of my imagination. But the truth was undeniable, and it crushed me. I remember standing in the doorway, unable to move or speak, feeling like the ground had opened beneath me. The look on Mark's face when he saw me was one of guilt mixed with something else. Defensiveness, maybe even shame. Emily's expression was unreadable, cold and distant. They didn't expect me to be there, and it was clear they hadn't planned on facing the consequences of what they'd done. That moment became a turning point, a fracture that split my life into before and after. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but all I could manage was silence. The pain was so raw it felt like a physical wound, a deep ache that settled into my bones. I felt betrayed not just by the man I loved, but by my own sister, the person I had trusted above all others. In the days that followed, the weight of their betrayal pressed down on me. Friends tried to offer comfort, but it was hard to explain the complexity of losing both a partner and a sibling in one blow. I found myself questioning everything: my judgment, my worth, the very nature of love and loyalty. How could they do this to me? How could Emily choose Mark over me, over our shared history? But amidst the heartbreak, a small voice inside me refused to be silenced. It whispered that I was stronger than this pain, that I could rise above the wreckage and rebuild my life on my own terms. I realized that I had two choices: to let this betrayal consume me, or to use it as fuel to push forward. I chose the latter. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that my value wasn't defined by the people who had hurt me. As a marketing executive at a growing tech firm, I had already built a solid reputation for creativity and leadership. Now, I channeled all my energy into climbing the corporate ladder, focusing on what I could control: my career and my own growth. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very qualities that had once attracted Mark, the ambition, the drive, were now my armor against the pain he had caused. I worked long hours, took on challenging projects, and sought out mentors who could help me sharpen my skills. Each small victory in the office became a balm for my wounded heart, a reminder that I was more than the sum of my broken relationships. Even though the betrayal felt like a personal failure, I refused to let it define me. I surrounded myself with a support system of friends who believed in me, who reminded me daily of my worth. I began to rediscover parts of myself I had neglected: the love for painting, the joy of hiking on weekends, the simple pleasure of a good book. These small acts of self-care became crucial in my healing process. Still, the shadow of Mark and Emily's betrayal lingered. Family gatherings became awkward and tense, and I made the difficult decision to distance myself from Emily for the time being. It was painful to sever ties, but I knew that some wounds needed time and space to heal. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Looking back, I realized that this chapter of my life was the catalyst for a transformation I hadn't anticipated. The heartbreak forced me to confront my vulnerabilities and to discover a resilience I didn't know I possessed. It taught me that betrayal, while devastating, can also be a powerful teacher, one that reveals the depths of one's own strength. As I move forward, the memory of that painful day remains a reminder of how far I've come. I am no longer the woman defined by the love of a man or the approval of a sister. I am Mia Thompson, the woman who faced betrayal, embraced her pain, and chose to rise above it. My story is far from over, and the next chapters will show how I turned heartbreak into empowerment. But for now, I am simply grateful to have survived the storm. Looking back, I realized that the signs were there long before I caught Mark and Emily together on my couch. It's strange how hindsight sharpens your vision, revealing the subtle clues you missed when you were blinded by trust and hope. The signs were there: the secretive texts, the sudden changes in behavior. But I chose to ignore them, convincing myself that everything was fine. It started with the little things. Mark's phone would buzz on the kitchen counter while we were out to dinner, and he'd quickly silence it, slipping away to take a call in another room. At first I thought it was just work. He was ambitious, after all, and his job demanded a lot. But the frequency of those calls increased, and the excuses became thinner. Sometimes he'd glance at his screen with a smile or a smirk that didn't feel meant for me. Emily, too, changed in ways I couldn't quite place. She started texting more in secret, locking her phone when I entered the room, and disappearing for hours without explanation. Our once easy conversations grew strained, filled with awkward pauses and forced smiles. I told myself she was dealing with her own issues, stress from work, a rough patch with friends. I wanted to believe the best of her, but deep down, I sensed something was wrong. One evening, 2 weeks before the day I found them, I had a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Mark had left his phone unattended on the coffee table while he stepped into the bathroom. My heart pounded as I debated whether to look, knowing it would betray his privacy but desperate for reassurance. The familiar conflict between trust and doubt tore at me. Finally, curiosity won. My fingers trembled as I unlocked his phone, scrolled through his messages, and found what I never wanted to see. There were texts from someone saved under a name I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. Sweet nothings, plans to meet, and inside jokes that I wasn't part of. Then came the photos. Candid shots of Mark and Emily together, laughing, close, and unmistakably more than friends. A wave of nausea swept over me. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal that was no longer a suspicion, but a glaring reality. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was damning. I saved the messages and photos, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief swirling inside me. How long had this been going on? How could they have hidden it so well? That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the screen, tears blurring my vision. The person I loved had been lying to me, and the person I trusted most had been complicit. The realization was like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and shattered. I felt like I'd been living in a dream that had suddenly turned into a nightmare. But amid the pain, a fierce resolve began to grow. I refused to be the victim of their deceit. I would not let their betrayal define me or steal my future. I needed to understand the full extent of their relationship, to confront the truth head-on. So, I began to gather every piece of evidence I could find. Screenshots of messages, social media posts, even whispers from mutual friends who had noticed the tension but hadn't known the reason. As I pieced together their secret, I also confronted the emotions that came with it. Rage at the lies, sadness for the loss of what I thought we had, and a deep sense of betrayal that cut through every part of my being. I questioned myself endlessly. Was I not enough? Had I missed the signs? Could I have done something differently? But slowly, I realized that none of this was my fault. Their choices were theirs alone. One night, I replayed a conversation in my head where Mark had told me, "You're too focused on your career. You don't have time for us." At the time, I had brushed it off as stress talking, but now it stung with new meaning. Was that his way of justifying the affair? And Emily? How many times had she told me she wanted to support me, only to betray that trust behind my back? The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that their relationship had been hidden in plain sight. They had become adept at wearing masks, playing their parts perfectly until the moment I found out. It was a cruel game of deception, and I was the one left to pick up the pieces. But in the midst of that darkness, I found clarity. The betrayal was not just a personal wound. It was a catalyst for change. I started to channel my anger into action, refusing to be defined by their choices. I promised myself that I would rise above the pain and transform it into something powerful. I began documenting everything carefully, not just for my own sanity, but because I knew I would need this evidence. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it would have consequences. I wanted to protect myself, to ensure that I had control over what came next. Collecting proof of their affair became a way to reclaim some semblance of power in a situation that had left me feeling powerless. At work, I found refuge in routine and purpose. I buried myself in projects, meetings, and presentations, letting the demands of my job drown out the chaos in my personal life. My colleagues noticed the change, the new intensity in my focus, the quiet determination in my eyes. I didn't share the details, but their support and encouragement were a balm. Still, the nights were the hardest. When the city quieted down and the noise faded, the ache of betrayal returned with full force. I wrestled with the urge to confront Mark and Emily, to demand answers and apologies. But I knew that confrontation had to wait until I was ready. I needed to gather my strength and prepare for the battle ahead. The revelation of their relationship changed everything, but it also marked the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life. I learned that pain could be a teacher, that betrayal, while devastating, could ignite a fire within me. I was no longer the naive woman who had trusted blindly. I was becoming someone who understood her worth and was ready to fight for it. In those dark days, I made a silent vow. I would not let Mark and Emily's betrayal define my future. I would prove that my value extended far beyond their deception. And as I looked toward the uncertain road ahead, I felt a flicker of hope. Hope that I could turn this heartbreak into something stronger, something that would ultimately set me free. The moment I confronted Mark and Emily, I knew everything would change forever. I had gathered the evidence, the messages, the photos, the undeniable proof of their betrayal, and I was ready to face them with it. What I hadn't anticipated was the coldness in their eyes, the way they met my pain with indifference, as if my hurt was nothing more than an inconvenience. I remember the day vividly. I invited them both to the small cafe where we used to gather before the truth came out, hoping the familiar setting might soften the harshness of what I was about to say. Instead, it only magnified the tension between us. As I laid out the evidence on the table, my hands shaking but my voice steady, I watched their faces closely, searching for remorse, regret, anything that would show they understood the damage they'd caused. Mark looked away, avoiding my gaze. When he finally spoke, his words were laced with excuses. "Mia, you've changed. You're so focused on work, on climbing the ladder, that you don't have time for us. Emily and we found something real." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Just a cold rationale that felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. Emily's response was even harder to bear. She crossed her arms and gave me a dismissive look. "I don't see why you're making such a big deal out of this. Things happen. We didn't plan for it, but it is what it is." Her words were sharp, unapologetic, as if our shared history meant nothing compared to whatever she had found with Mark. It was as if she was trying to erase the sister I had been, the friend I had hoped she'd remain. Their lack of remorse stunned me. I had imagined this confrontation 1,000 times in my head. Tears, apologies, maybe even a chance for understanding. Instead, I was met with coldness and indifference that cut deeper than any betrayal. I realized then that they had already moved on emotionally, and I was left to pick up the pieces alone. For a moment, I felt powerless, overwhelmed by a wave of sadness and anger. How could the people closest to me dismiss my feelings so easily? How could they betray me and expect me to simply accept it? But amid the storm of emotions, a quiet voice inside me began to rise. A voice that reminded me I was stronger than this pain. I chose not to lash out or beg for explanations. Instead, I took a deep breath and told them, I deserve better than this, not from either of you. With that, I stood up and walked away, knowing that clinging to their approval or forgiveness would only hold me back. It was a painful moment, but also a liberating one. In the days that followed, I found myself retreating from the chaos of their drama. I realized that the only way to reclaim my life was to turn inward, to focus on what I could control, myself and my future. The betrayal had left me emotionally raw, but it also revealed a truth I had been avoiding. My true power lay not in the approval of others, but in my own strength and ambition. I poured my energy into my work with a newfound determination. The office became my sanctuary, a place where my accomplishments spoke louder than any personal pain. I set clear goals for myself, aiming higher than I ever had before. If Mark and Emily thought they could break me, they were wrong. I was going to prove my worth through my achievements. As I immersed myself in my career, I began to see opportunities where I had once seen obstacles. I took on challenging projects that others shied away from, volunteered for leadership roles, and sought mentorship from senior executives who recognized my potential. Each success, no matter how small, was a victory over the betrayal that had threatened to consume me. I also started to rebuild my support network. Friends who had stood by me during the darkest times became my pillars of strength. They listened without judgment, offered encouragement, and reminded me of my value beyond the heartbreak. Their belief in me fueled my own confidence, helping me to see past the pain and envision a brighter future. Throughout this period, I kept my distance from Mark and Emily. I realized that forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, and I wasn't ready to take that step. For now, I needed to protect myself from further hurt and focus on healing. It was a difficult choice, but necessary for my growth. As weeks turned into months, I noticed a shift within myself. The anger and sadness that once dominated my thoughts began to give way to resilience and resolve. I was no longer defined by their betrayal, but by my response to it. I had become someone who faced adversity head-on, who refused to be broken by the actions of others. In quiet moments, I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. I learned that betrayal often reveals more about the betrayer than the betrayed. I discovered that true strength comes from within, from owning your story and choosing how it shapes you. And I realized that the path to healing is paved with self-love, determination, and the courage to move forward. Mark and Emily's choices had shattered the trust I once had, but they could not shatter my spirit. I was determined to rise above the pain, to channel it into ambition and growth. The confrontation had been painful, but it was also a turning point. A moment when I reclaimed my voice and took the first steps toward a new chapter in my life. I didn't know what the future held, but I was no longer afraid of facing it alone. I had learned to stand on my own, to trust myself, and to believe in the power of my own resilience. The betrayal that had once threatened to define me was now the fuel that propelled me forward. And so, with a heart still healing but a spirit unbroken, I began to strategize. I would prove my worth not through confrontation or revenge, but through success and leadership. I would climb the corporate ladder, not just for myself, but to show that I was more than the sum of their betrayal. I was ready to rewrite my story, on my own terms. The months following my confrontation with Mark and Emily marked the beginning of a transformation I hadn't dared to imagine. I channeled every ounce of pain, every ounce of betrayal, into a fierce determination to succeed. My work became more than just a job. It was my proving ground, the arena where I would reclaim my identity and assert my worth. I took on projects that were complex and high stakes, ones that others hesitated to touch. Late nights blurred into early mornings as I poured my energy into crafting strategies, analysing data, and pitching ideas. Each challenge was a test, and I was determined to pass with flying colours. My colleagues noticed the shift, the quiet confidence I carried, the precision in my presentations, the way I led meetings with a calm authority that belied my years. One pivotal opportunity came when our company announced an initiative to expand into new markets. I volunteered to lead the market research team, a role that required both strategic thinking and leadership. It was daunting, but I embraced it, knowing that success here could elevate my profile within the company. I assembled a diverse team, encouraged collaboration, and pushed for innovation. The project was a success, earning praise from senior management and opening doors I had only dreamed of. As I climbed the corporate ladder, my confidence grew. I no longer saw myself as the woman defined by betrayal. I was a leader, a visionary, a rising star. The pain that had once threatened to consume me was now the fuel that powered my ascent. Every promotion, every accolade, was a victory over the past, a reminder that I was more than the sum of my heartbreak. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of my rise began to unsettle Mark and Emily. Rumors reached me that their relationship was strained, the pressure of my success casting long shadows over their once smug confidence. It was a quiet satisfaction to know that the tables had turned, that the people who had tried to break me were now watching me soar. Yet, I remained focused on my path. I understood that true empowerment wasn't about revenge. It was about growth and self-respect. I cultivated relationships with mentors and peers who inspired me and challenged me to be better. I took leadership courses, attended industry conferences, and stayed ahead of trends. Each step was deliberate, a building block toward a future I was determined to own. Balancing work and personal healing wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of everything threatened to pull me under. But I learned to lean on my support network. Friends who reminded me of my strength, who celebrated my wins and held me up during setbacks. Their belief in me became a mirror reflecting my own worth, reinforcing the resilience I was building from within. As I embraced my new role, I also began to redefine what success meant to me. It wasn't just about titles or paychecks. It was about integrity, authenticity, and the ability to inspire others. I found satisfaction in mentoring junior colleagues, helping them navigate challenges and encouraging them to pursue their own ambitions. This sense of purpose added depth to my achievements, transforming them from personal victories into something more meaningful. The changes in my life extended beyond the office. I moved into a new apartment that felt like a fresh start, filled it with art and light, and created a space where I could recharge and dream. I reconnected with passions I had set aside: painting, hiking, exploring new cuisines. These small joys grounded me, reminding me that life was rich and multifaceted, even after betrayal. In reflecting on this period, I recognized that my journey was about more than overcoming heartbreak. It was about reclaiming agency, rewriting my narrative, and standing tall in the face of adversity. The woman who had once been consumed by sorrow had evolved into someone who commanded respect and radiated confidence. My promotion to a senior management position was a milestone that silenced any lingering doubts, both in myself and in those who had underestimated me. Walking into that role, I felt a surge of pride and determination. This was the culmination of years of hard work, resilience, and unwavering belief in my own potential. Yet, I knew this was only the beginning. The corporate world was competitive, and I was ready to meet every challenge head-on. My vision extended beyond personal success. I wanted to shape company culture, foster innovation, and pave the way for others like me, those who had faced setbacks but refused to be defined by them. Through it all, I remained mindful of the lessons betrayal had taught me. Trust had to be earned and guarded, but it also required courage. The courage to open your heart again, to take risks, despite the fear of being hurt. I was learning to balance vulnerability with strength, empathy with resilience. Mark and Emily were no longer at the center of my story. They were characters in a chapter I had closed. My focus was on growth, on building something lasting and true. The pain of their betrayal had been transformed into a catalyst for empowerment, fueling a journey that was uniquely mine. Every day, as I stepped into my office, led my team, and made decisions that shaped our company's future, I was reminded of how far I had come. The woman who had once been broken was now whole, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. This chapter of my life was a testament to the power of resilience and ambition. It showed me that even when life's darkest moments threaten to derail you, there is always a path forward. You just have to find the strength to walk it. The day I was officially named CEO of the company, I felt a surge of emotions I hadn't expected. Pride, relief, vindication. They all mingled beneath the surface, but the dominant feeling was one of quiet strength. This wasn't just a professional milestone. It was a personal triumph, a statement that I had risen above the betrayal that once threatened to define me. The announcement came during a company-wide meeting, a moment that felt surreal as I stood before my colleagues, the weight of responsibility settling comfortably on my shoulders. I looked out into the crowd and saw faces filled with respect and anticipation. This was my moment, proof that hard work, resilience, and unwavering focus could overcome even the deepest wounds. I knew the news would reach Mark and Emily, and I imagined their reactions: surprise, maybe even discomfort. For years, they had underestimated me, dismissed my potential, and tried to diminish my worth. But now, my success was undeniable, a testament to the strength I had cultivated from the ashes of betrayal. Embracing my role as CEO wasn't without challenges. The position demanded vision, decisiveness, and the ability to inspire a diverse team. I approached it with a blend of humility and confidence, knowing that my journey had prepared me for this very moment. I was determined to lead with integrity, innovation, and empathy. One of my first initiatives as CEO was to foster a culture of openness and collaboration. I wanted to create an environment where employees felt valued and empowered to contribute their best ideas. Drawing from my own experiences, I understood the importance of trust and support in building a successful organization. My leadership style evolved as I navigated complex decisions and steered the company through competitive markets. I prioritized growth and sustainability, balancing ambition with responsibility. Each success reinforced my belief that I was capable of far more than I had ever imagined. Beyond the office, I began to embrace a new chapter in my personal life. Freed from the shadows of the past, I found joy in simple pleasures: weekend hikes, dinners with friends, quiet evenings painting in my apartment. These moments grounded me, reminding me that success wasn't just about titles or achievements, but about living a balanced and fulfilling life. The transformation wasn't lost on those around me. Friends and colleagues noticed the grace with which I carried myself, the confidence that radiated from within. Their admiration was a balm to the wounds of the past, affirming that I had not only survived, but thrived. As I settled into my role, I occasionally received tentative messages from Emily. Her words were laced with grudging acknowledgement, hints of regret, or perhaps a desire to reconnect. But I chose silence. Forgiveness, I realized, was a journey I wasn't ready to take on her terms. My healing was mine alone, and it didn't require her validation. Mark remained out of my life, a chapter I had closed with resolve. The man who once held my heart was now a distant memory, overshadowed by the woman I had become. My focus was on the future, a future I was shaping with intention and strength. In this new phase, I found purpose beyond personal success. I mentored young women in the industry, sharing my story not to dwell on pain, but to inspire resilience. I spoke at conferences about leadership, empowerment, and the importance of owning one's narrative. Each opportunity to uplift others deepened my own sense of fulfillment. The journey from betrayal to triumph had been arduous, marked by moments of doubt and despair. But standing here as CEO, I knew that every step had been worth it. The pain I endured had forged a strength that no setback could shake. I had proven to myself, and to the world, that my worth was not defined by the actions of others. I was a leader, a visionary, and above all, a survivor. This chapter was a celebration of growth, resilience, and the power of choosing oneself. As I looked ahead, I embraced the possibilities with open arms. The path wasn't always easy, but it was mine to walk. And with every stride, I carried the lessons of my past as a reminder of how far I had come, and how far I was yet to go. There was a moment, not long after I stepped into my new role as CEO, when Emily reached out to me. Her message was tentative, laced with the kind of grudging acknowledgement that only time and regret can bring. She wrote simply, "I see you've done well. Maybe we can talk someday." I stared at those words for a long time, feeling the old wounds stir beneath the surface. But instead of rushing to respond, I chose silence. It wasn't anger or bitterness that held me back. It was healing. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give others. It's something you grant yourself. And I wasn't ready to reopen that chapter on her terms. My journey had been about reclaiming my power, and that meant setting boundaries, protecting my peace, and choosing when and how to engage with the past. Reflecting on everything I'd been through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the long climb back to myself, I realized that my success was the truest response I could have given. It wasn't just about professional accomplishment or a new title. It was about living fully and authentically, free from the shadows that once threatened to consume me. I thought back to the woman I had been when Mark and Emily's secret shattered my world. A woman filled with hope and love, but also naivety and vulnerability. The pain of that betrayal had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, but it had also propelled me toward growth I might never have pursued otherwise. I had learned that resilience isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it. Leading my company now, I carried those lessons with me. I prioritized empathy and integrity in my leadership, knowing firsthand how important it was to create a supportive environment where people felt valued. I mentored young women, sharing my story not to dwell on the past, but to inspire strength and self-worth. Each conversation, each act of encouragement, was a reminder that our experiences, however painful, can be transformed into sources of empowerment. Life outside the office had blossomed too. I found joy in simple moments: a hike through the woods on a crisp autumn morning, the smell of fresh coffee as I painted in my sunlit studio, laughter shared with friends who had become chosen family. These were the pieces of my life that made success meaningful, grounding me in a sense of wholeness and peace. Looking back, I understood that betrayal had been a harsh teacher, but also a necessary one. It revealed who I was beneath the surface, tested my limits, and ultimately showed me the depth of my own strength. The journey wasn't just about moving past the pain. It was about embracing my worth and choosing myself every day. Emily's message, left unanswered, was a symbol of my healing. It wasn't closure granted by her, but a quiet affirmation of my own agency. I had the power to decide what to carry forward and what to leave behind. And I chose to carry forward the lessons, the strength, and the hope. As I stood at the helm of my company, leading with purpose and passion, I felt a profound sense of freedom. I was no longer tethered to the hurt of the past, but propelled by the possibilities of the future. My story was no longer defined by betrayal, but by resilience, growth, and the unwavering belief that I am enough. This journey had taught me that life's darkest moments can birth the brightest transformations. That pain, while inevitable, does not have to be permanent. And that the greatest triumphs come not from avoiding hardship, but from rising each time we fall. I am Mia Thompson, a woman who faced betrayal, embraced her pain, and chose to rise. And in doing so, I found a life filled with strength, hope, and the promise of new beginnings.